We're gonna have to wait to Mr. Sam shoot, but we're rolling. So let's
Oh,
just let me just get started with some topics in the channel people were talking about yesterday. So okay, the number one thing there is, Paul, you're right. There is some sort of social pressure when you're trying to solve a problem, and maybe I took it a little bit too far because, I love to troll people peacefully, just nothing hostile, just, kind of get the ball rolling and have a little laugh. It's just how I was with my friends back home. Like, you know how friends are. Like, your real friend is the one that will see you in trouble and stand there laughing at you. You don't see that anymore. Like kids don't go hang out outside and play outside anymore. They're all on their tablets and their Wi-Fi network and whatever, so they don't get to actually have that kind of experience, right? I remember a point in time where I would be sitting with my friends. We just jump into a sugarcane field and we just take sugar canes and we just sit down and just chew on those. We had so much fun, and people would come out and be like, you're throwing trash on the street, and we just get running and all that. It was very interesting times, and friends didn't do that anymore. Kids didn't do that anymore. It's mostly text and chat, and this is why I feel for Gen Zers. They're living in a completely different world. Like, being out on the street, I guess it's not that interesting anymore. You don't see a kid with a stick sitting in the backyard anymore. Everyone there on their Wi-Fi and stuff. So anyway, back to this piece. I just want you to understand something. The reason why I'm a huge advocate for pair programming, mob programming, people coming together and trying to solve a problem. I guess, Paul, I think you literally hit the nail on the head there when you said, nice haircut, Sam. Love it.
haircut.
So
Yes.
so 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 the thing about Sam is that he goes little more less on hair, and I go more. Like I turn into Bob Marley, and he's just going less, going more. We're covering the spectrum. Anyway, sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there, but um, you know, Paul, you said it very well. That we are here together to kind of find a solution, right? How you solve every problem in pseudocode, algorithm, whatever the case may be, and then you can jump into the code and you can materialize that. I want to clarify this. The other thing that I want to talk about is, the stuff that we're building today evolve, like software evolve. One of the biggest things that I've seen software engineers do, they think like it has to be perfect from day one. That's not what it is. We're building smaller pieces so the people watching us, you have to understand, we have a huge audience, right? My channel is almost hitting 6,000 subscribers. These are 6,000 engineers from around the world looking at our content and engaging in it and wanting to see, what the outcome of these content would be. And if we can't show them the slow and easy way for them to evolve and learn, then we're not really kind of extracting the highest benefit from our work. The last thing is for you guys. This is really important. This is your time and your energy and your effort. And I want to document this to show the world how amazing you are. Even when we're making mistakes, even when we're not getting it exactly right, there is some knowledge in that very, mistake that we make. There's some experience baked into that. This is why this is how, my parents raised me, respect people older than you. Why say even if they're wrong, the wrongness is rooted into more experience, you know, than you. I remember I heard this was like, if someone is older than you, they've done more things that you can, like they took a bus to Montreal, you'll never do that. Why would anyone take a bus to Montreal now? Hey, Sam is having his breakfast too. You know, see, so this is what I'm trying to say. This is a documented experience into building software in real life. So don't think what I'm doing here, or don't think they were just playing. No, I have a very specific vision for the project. This is my 37th enterprise level project in my career. So I've been through that rodeo. You guys have been as well. Nick, I know your experience. Paul, we talked. Sam has been, on the identity team at Microsoft for almost 8 years. 8 years now, Sam? Almost 5 years? Did you get your eye drop yet? The little 5-year anniversary?
Sorry,
No,
I
we will
get
sit
my
here
5 years.
awkwardly staring at you
Yeah,
while you're chewing.
I have been in Microsoft almost 9 years.
So
But
one
in
more year and you're
identity,
gonna get a new prize, a new one.
yeah, that's
Or
for
you
the
can,
whole Microsoft. Whole Microsoft.
yeah, whole Microsoft. Yeah.
In the identity, it's almost 5 years.
5 years, man, 5 years. I don't remember staying 5 years anywhere, you know, to be honest with you. I'll show you guys, I'll bring you some people here into this channel, people that are really near and dear to my heart, who has been around for like some of them 20 years, 25 years. Some of them have been at Microsoft when I was 3 years old. Like I was 3, I was still with a pacifier in my mouth, and they were actually developing and designing systems at Microsoft. And you sit down and talk to these people, they're very humble, they're beautiful, beautiful people, and very smart, extremely smart. Like you sit down there and be like, how does he know all that? Like, what kind of brain capacity that is? That did we ever figure out how to connect our brains to the cloud so it can have elastic storage? It's crazy. So anyway, okay, back to you guys. What are we talking about today? What do you want to do? Go ahead.
By the way,
Where's
that was the most
Joe, by the way? Go ahead. Go ahead, Nick.
effective way of saying that we're a bunch of assholes that I've heard. Like,
We're all assholes. Who cares? Engineers, do you know why I love engineers so much? I could be literally in the marketing. I can be a smooth marketing and salesperson. I can sit down and get someone to buy something, and I do. I can sell prosciuttos to rabbis. There's no problem there, right? Or imams, I guess.
here's the thing: you
Uh-huh.
got you that joke right there.
Mhm.
You got to be from a city. You got to be from a big city to get that joke,
I'm not. I'm from the
right?
desert, but I'm a
I'm not Muslim.
sponge. I'm a
No, I
sponge,
mean
you
like
know.
in America,
Yeah, in America, yeah, of course, Seattle. I mean, come on.
I'm not Muslim. I'm not Jewish. I'm I am Italian, so I know prosciutto, right? But like that's a niche joke. I respect that joke a lot. I'm just saying.
So what I'm trying to tell you is, see, I can be whatever I want to be, but I choose to be with engineers, software engineers, because you guys are the most realist people I've ever seen. Like the engineers will give it to you the way it is. Listen, man, it's broken and we're fucked. It's just as simple as that. Let's not sugarcoat this. We're screwed, right? So,
And that leads nicely into how we ended up with the disaster that was the train wreck that was last week. So
okay, I see you sharing your screen, Paul.
yeah, so
Sharing it
I
in
made
4K. Good God in heaven. Go ahead, tell me. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
made a classic mistake last week. I took a
Mm.
bad requirement that was ill-defined, and then I rolled with it. What I should have done was sat down and said, okay, guys, let's clarify this. Let's get some more detail on it first, and then go from there. So what I've done is I've sat down and had to think about kind of what needs to be achieved here. So if we go back to the code.
Okay.
So the way that we were going, the last decision that we kind of agreed on.
Paul, can you zoom in so I can see it while I'm in the bathroom using the Where's Shooty McStabby? He's not coming? Okay.
I don't know where Joe is.
Okay, Joe.
Sorry, I like having some visibility of my my code.
Well,
anyway.
Okay. Here's the thing. Just maximize that screen because Why don't you just share Visual Studio? Just Visual Studio, or do you need the whole desktop?
There you go.
Show off. Okay, let's go. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so we got to the point where we agreed that we were going to generate a random model, essentially. And then off the back of that model, I remembered earlier on, probably about 3 or 4 sessions ago, when we were designing O nodes, we were talking about how the design of O nodes would lend nicely to, in a debugging scenario, it would be nice to be able to get our query as a blob of JSON. So then I sort of thought, well, we're debugging our query, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So logically, the next thing that we probably want is our model JSON.
Okay.
But we don't have any code to do this yet, right? So what I did was I said, right, okay, fine, that will exist. So I'm going to make that part of my test. However, how we do this may not necessarily be this way. You may want to build a service or something. So that's up for discussion. But having the test written in this fashion means that I've got a template where I can say, is this the kind of API that we want to build? So I thought, right, okay. And then the next thing that we potentially want is our query. And the way that we were going to get our query was from our model, right? So I'd say to query string.
Nice. Okay.
Okay, so I've got a randomly generated model. I've got a blob of JSON that comes from that. And then I've got the query that comes from that same model, potentially.
And you can serialize your model into the expected O node. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so this is our given. Obviously, our check then is to say, okay, our result that we're trying to confer is we go into our tokenization service and we tokenize our query. So that will give us a new model, right? So then what we want to do is our assertions, right? So our result should
be equivalent to the query.
So our result.
No, you're spitting out a model, so it would be the model. Yep.
Yeah. So it should be the same as our model that we started off with, right?
Yep.
But also now, because we've got our JSON and our query, we can actually check on those as well. So we can say, okay, result to JSON. Should I cannot type the equivalent to our model JSON from above, right?
Yeah.
And then the same with our query. So our result to query string should be equivalent to our query. Notice how Visual Studio filled in most of that for me. That was beautiful. The AI on this is just crazy.
We're not going to have jobs very soon. It's going to be writing everything by itself.
So now I've got essentially a 7-line test. Now I know this doesn't pass because what I was saying earlier, these two JSON and 2 query string methods. So what I've done is I said, well, hey, in true kind of, how we're doing this with test-driven code, I wrote this blob of code and then I went, okay, so we're going to need some extensions for an O node. I didn't want to put it in the O node because remember last week you were saying, hey, you don't put methods into your actual model. I wrote them as extensions because I thought, well, right now it could be an extension class, but later maybe we could decide that maybe we want that to be a service or something else. But at least if it was in a separate class, we could put the functionality in here. And I implemented the bare minimum just to get kind of JSON serialization working. I deliberately didn't implement turning it into a query string because then I figured, okay, maybe there's some discussion around that and how we serialize a model back to the query. So there's some complexity in this.
I see where you're going with this. I think that there may be some small problems here, right? One is that there's implicit declaration here, and it needs to either be made explicit or you have to unwind it. Is that, are you going to have query parity? What does it mean for queries to be equivalent to each other, right? So, for example, we don't capture white space or minutia. The current model now, if you were to project back from an O node into a query, because we don't capture it, something's going to get lost, right? So I see a disconnect between being able to say, yeah, the query here we'll be able to round trip the query. Do you get what I'm saying?
So I noticed that it wasn't just white space. There were a few other characters.
Of things, but that's the easiest example, right?
Yeah. So there were things like, when we do like $select equals or $random string equals.
Yeah.
The equals character isn't actually captured in the model. So
exactly.
to my mind, it made sense just to write this kind of code out and then say, hey, what does it mean to make this test pass? And that's, of course, where we have this week's discussion, and then leading on from that.
Throw another monkey wrench into this, but I think ONode, the more I look at ONode, the more I think that this is a model that represents a deeper layer than what we're trying to work on now, right? I think what we should have is an O token, and those are just simply labels, right? And it's like, hey, white space, open parentheses, first, what is it? Directive, indicator, directive, et cetera, white space, directive assignment, and then, et cetera, right? Then, we don't care about like the nesting. You just care about what the stream is. That gets processed into ONode.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what we've got at the moment is a fancy string split. What we really need is something like a compiler's proper tokenizer so that we can roll with that. But now we're starting to identify that that's what we need from a test like this.
Yep. So just let me kind of, just propose something. If you get rid of ONode and turn it into O token, you'll never use ONode, because what's going to happen
that's not the suggestion. I'm saying that ONode is a layer deeper than this, right? O token sits on top, and then that stream gets transformed into ONode later on.
The other nice thing about this idea is if we attach a contract through an interface, it can be swapped out by another implementation.
Right, but okay, the name is not an issue, but what I'm trying to say here is that there is a tokenization stage, and then there is a processing stage. You're gonna take whatever you spit, ONode, O token, whatever the case may be, and turn it into an expression, whatever that expression may be, right? And that expression is gonna be what Link picks up and runs with. Do you guys remember our original discussion when we talked about breaking it into these smaller pieces, and we want to make this plug and play? So there will never be ONode beyond this point. There will never be any more other than some other service sitting down the road. I'm gonna take your screen for a second, Paul, if that's okay. Paul Ward.
Yeah, taking. Go on, Sam.
I totally agree with Nicholas' input. Yeah, so I think the first we have the string, we have tokenize. It should be a token. It's just a string split to understand the query option. So it's a syntax pass. Just take the string out. It's an in-memory representative for the original string. And so out the tokenize, we have to understand that. So we call it semantic parsing. So we take the token and understand that each token is in the tree and convert it to our own node. So this is the output of the first layer.
Okay.
So when we have the own node, it means we are ready for the next layer to process. For example, we can generate the link expression for. We can use it. So anyone can use it in the signal R, something like this.
Okay.
So it's the syntax parsing. We call the tokenize, and semantic parsing. We output the own node. So that's the first process that we want to build, right?
Okay, so you basically want to go and say, let's say,
conceptual model generator.
Yeah, convention service. What did you say? Conceptual, semantic?
Conceptual model generator or semantic model generator. It's the same thing, right?
We need something service, and it needs to have only one term. That's a lot of words. Pick up one.
Semantic service.
Semantic.
E.
Semantic. E. Okay.
We're not the company. We're the. By the way, I think one of the things I think there's another layer in here between O token and semantic service. Semantic service is responsible for the transformation of a stream of O tokens into ONode, where we have our conceptual or semantic model. However, I think that the requirement for semantic service is that you have a valid stream of tokens. It is a valid, a valid.
Well, that semantic service will run that validation.
Well, I would disagree. I would say that you have another layer where you have a validation service. That way that way your semantic service can say, listen, my basic here's the thing. If you want these parts to be pluggable, right? If you tell someone that you have now 2 responsibilities in this, right? You're violating.
It's not though.
It's
not
though. In my opinion.
So hear me out.
So there's 2 routes for this. One is it's inline in the pipeline. The other is that it's pluggable into semantic service. So
right.
Either semantic service, you'd be coming into it.
Okay. So just hear me out on this, and then tell me what you think. If this is a service does 3 things. It's all around the same concept, right? It's all around the same purpose. Every service will process the data in 3 stages. These 3 stages are exactly in that particular order. It goes from validation of input into processing of that input into integration with that input. What that basically means is that this is just a tri-nature around us of everything. Like, if you have a service, whatever the input I'm going to pass in for you were talking about this earlier. Oh, it shouldn't be null. It should have these particular conditions, because I want people to be able to go and say, if this is my service A in here, and this service does these 3 things, I can maybe the token that's being outputted from my component is not valid for one service, but it's valid for the other, right? So service B will say, you know what, in my rules, in my jurisdiction, my realm, my validation rules will allow that input and work with it, right? And that will exist in every service. Like the stuff that we're building right now, down the road, that we're just doing the happy path, the kind of straight line. But there will be other tests that will go and say, here is my validation rules for a raw text to come in. This raw text is not supposed to be null or empty or white space. This is going to live in your tokenization service. You'll also have another rule where you say, well, what if my dependency has an issue? How do I propagate that exception or that issue upstream, right? There will be these 3 things. You're going to see this in every service. If we break this into its own service like this, now you're going into what I call FIMTO responsibilities. Like you're going away from the domain that you're working with, which is working with a token and making sure that it's in good state, process it, and then pass it downstream into this stage where you're saying, oh, I'm going to even break those responsibilities further, which I don't know if you're going to get much out of it.
So I think that, I don't disagree with you here. I apologize. Sam, go.
Okay. Does customer, can customer replace the validation each step in the service A?
They can either reuse it, or they can make up their own.
We provide the service for customer use, or we finish the service A, and the customer can replace any validation process or integration in the service A?
They're going to have to build a service A and reuse existing validations or processing, or make up their own. Yes. As one component, one processing piece. Yes.
So you mean you retrieve the validation from service A and build it using the existing processing integration and build service B?
I was thinking more about just reusing the code, not necessarily inheriting.
Are we trying to get ahead of ourselves a little bit here? So the original problem was, okay, we've got a string and we want to end up with O nodes in some structural fashion. So are we saying that the first step is not to produce O nodes, but is to effectively produce an O token list?
Which is not very simple.
So when you say you want to produce an O node, I think that puts the cart before the horse. So yes,
this is where I was going.
Jumping ahead, I think it's addressing steps which we kind of skipped over initially. Sam, I'm not Sam. Sorry, Hassan. I want to go back just to where. Can you go down to this diagram? So I don't disagree with you, right? Yes, every service should validate that the core requirements for that service are in place before you start processing. However, I think that what we're doing here is that we're conflating the core requirements for a transformation service with what should be a validation service. Now, like there's a difference between saying, okay, this thing is not null, these structures are in place properly. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we couldn't do the validation there. What I'm saying is I see a responsibility of validating a stream of tokens as a valid OData query as being a large enough responsibility to warrant its own service with its own requirements for validation on input processing, even if that output is still the stream itself or some set of errors that say, here are all the things that you got that are wrong, right? And then we can say, and then someone can say, you know what? I trust the people at Microsoft to go and do that. I'll use their service. But I need to tweak these nodes that come out of here for further processing. I need to add some metadata to it, right? Because we talked about that, right? This is the place where they would do that, and to say, oh, hey, I have to kind of bring in and rebuild all of that, where I think that we're violating single responsibility principle here.
So let me ask you this. How can you validate without implying a certain purpose for this validation? Like you're going and saying, here's a string. Here's a
You're
string right here.
validating the query. You're not validating the
No, I
core
understand.
requirements for the service.
I understand. You have a query coming in here that says select name, right? If you're gonna validate this, you're gonna validate this for what? It's still, there's no purpose yet. It's not single responsibility or single purpose
You're
because
validating for correctness against the spec.
Against the spec, right?
Yes.
But we're literally saying we want to allow every component to either determine based on what they're validating for, what they're gonna do next with it, and we want this to be pluggable. Like if someone comes and says, I'm gonna invent a new thing called fuzzy, like this, and this fuzzy takes X equal YZ, which doesn't necessarily match OData convention, they shall be allowed to do so.
Okay.
What I'm trying to say is validation in and of itself is not a purpose, is not a responsibility. It hits it lends itself down to the actual purpose which lives in this processing realm in here.
My thinking is until you've got a model, you've got nothing to validate because you're basically just
There you
saying,
go.
hey,
This
I've got
is
a
it.
string.
Yep.
I've got a string.
Yep.
I can't check that string is right until I know what's in it. So I've got to parse it first.
That's it. 100 exactly that. I couldn't
That brings
say it
us
any
back
better.
to tokenization then.
Huh?
Yeah, at the very least, we need a token list. And then from our token list, we either validate the token list or we agree that we're going to build our own node, which is our hierarchy, our model, and then we validate our model. To my mind, when you've got your model, even at that point, I think validation boils down to attempt to process it. And if there's anything left over, it's invalid. If there's nothing left over, then it's all been processed correctly.
Yeah.
But if you process something and one of the services that's doing the processing fails, that's a validation exception. To my mind, validation comes with actually processing the data that you've parsed.
You have to. I don't think like validation in and of itself. You know what this is like? It's like you're saying, I'm gonna integrate to SQL, but I'm not gonna tell you why. Right? I'm gonna validate this string, but I'm not gonna tell you why. It seems something is missing there. This is 50% responsibility. I think it should be a little bit bigger than that. And I'll talk to you guys a little bit about, again, try nature of things. Like every, okay, let me put it this way. You know how we say this is object-oriented programming, right? Objects are 2D or 3D? What do you guys think? Objects are 2D or 3D?
Yes.
Neither.
Neither.
Object is a thing. It's
not a real thing?
It's a thing.
Okay. It's a thing, but is it 2D or 3D though?
It's whatever we say it is.
It's whatever we say it is, right? If I say the word object to you, the first thing that comes to your mind is a 3D object, a thing that has sides and width and height and length. It's an object, right? At least that's how Alan Kay imagined it when he said we want to extract models from nature and simulate their interactions. No? Does it ring a bell? No? So let me just tell you this. in your service, every single aspect you're working with, every single aspect of your model fulfills a single purpose. So there's an aspect that's coming from here that is the validation. There's an aspect that's coming from the top here, that's the exceptions and integrations. There's another aspect that's coming from here that's called the actual processing and logic, right? your your object, you guys haven't even worked with me on partial classes yet, and breaking this apart, and it's going to be very interesting. But what I'm just trying to say is that I define responsibility for a service as a service that makes sure its input is valid, it does its purpose, and then pass it downstream to whatever integration point it's working with. In this case, it'll be the lake house, but I can't throw that at you, not just yet. We'll talk about that at some point. you know Anyway, let's just go back to this one. So you just want to run a rename O node to O token? Is that what it is?
No, it's a step
No.
before that, by the sounds of things.
I
So the O
think I
node
have a
is
good first step for us. Can we inspect a string to see if it's OData enough to continue?
well, some of it will be, but some of it might not
Some of it
necessarily
might,
be.
some of it might not. Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah,
Hassan, is your concern that like, let's say you want to extend, like, for fuzzy, right? Using the fuzzy example,
Yeah,
that you want to, that you would want one place where people have to say, oh, okay, I know that I need these things. So here's the validation. Now I need to transform that into the nodes,
right.
right? Is you don't want to bifurcate those responsibilities across multiple services.
No,
Here's the
because
thing.
mhm.
If that is your desire, I do not see a way that you can inject new functionality without, you're going to have bifurcation somewhere. I think it's a noble attempt, right? But let's say, further down the line, right? When you when you translate to your data or translate to
Your
expression,
expression.
like what does it translate to? Like, some people may want to translate to some stub, like what EF does with functions, right? With SQL functions. Some
Yep.
people may want to be some other, representation in the expression tree. You're not going to put that in here because also now
Whoever,
you're loading
whoever,
responsibilities.
yes, whoever owns that module is responsible for making it come from the other side, however way they choose. Again, we're trying to kind of let me do this again, just real quick. This is your lake house. This is your substrate, and you have all these components. Eventually we'll be building that integration with this substrate. So you have this processing piece, you have this, this one does, let's say this one does, your tokenization, this one does your validation, and each one of them is stamping, just like when you're sending mail to a friend, it's stamping it with a certain event category that other ones will be, susceptible to it, or they'll be looking for it, right? So let's say Nick came in and he said, you know what, I'm going to implement this new module that does fuzzy. So this is a new module from the very beginning that, is not necessarily an OData convention, but Nick had to do this because he's trying to implement this new cool thing and he's experimenting with it. Eventually, these things propagate and become a standard. But let's say you built this, you will also be responsible for building the other component that will take that input and process it and spit it from the other side into whatever you want. You could spit it as an expression, you could spit it as another string, you could process it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So again, I guess the bottom line here is most of these services will be talking to this one big, substrate, and the ones that are interested in the particular event will pick it up and process it, right? And each one of them is responsible for making sure at its own convention that the data that it's working with is in a valid state. You might come at some point in time and say, by the way, just so you understand, I am totally giving people the freedom to go and say, I'm going to build a validation service anyway, and I don't care what Hassan says. Great. I'll give you the capability, go make that mistake, right? If you want to do it. However, because we're building you guys, it's like, think about this OData Neo as the people who build Legos. They build these really cool structures with Legos, but then they go and tell you, here's all the Legos, you can build your own as well. So it's not really a product in the sense of the product that you're imagining, one big piece that people will pull in and actually run on their ASP.NET Core. That will be one Lego structure that we're building, but they can literally destruct it and build it back up however they want. Rewritable software. Anyway, we can jump into these discuss. I can talk about this for hours. You know, it's a problem. But you know, I guess back to this. So what? So you wanted to build a service that says you have to transform into something. You know, we need to have something that takes in a string and produces a strongly typed model. What do you want that to be? Or what do you want that to look like?
My understanding was that we've gone from taking a raw string and producing O nodes to saying, hey, there may be something in between the two. So thinking about it logically, the thing that would be in between the two would be the string has been split up. So it's been split into tokens, but its hierarchy hasn't been built out yet, which is what the O node structure would be.
Sure. I can, let's change the name of O node to O token and let's move forward. If that's
no. We're not changing O node. So O node is still a hierarchical object, right? But O tokens are not. They're just a piece. Think of it like I've got my long OData string and I chopped a bit out and I'm saying this is this kind of token and it's a piece of that string and it's a piece in the sequential list. So an O token doesn't have children. An O token just is part of an array essentially that represents that original string. And then we take that array and we build the O node hierarchy from it.
So we turn the string into a flat array of something else that we can process easier.
Exactly that. That's, I think, what the discussion amounted to. Is that kind of where we want to go with it? Or do we feel that we can just build out the hierarchy off the bat like we've been trying to do here?
I just feel it's so meta. Like, what do you get out of...
I mean, it goes back to what Paul was trying to do, right? If he wants to have the ability to, like, two-way, bilateral, transformation, then you need to capture everything because you need to be able to reconstruct that at the end, right? It goes back to the way the test was written. If that is not a requirement, then you got to strip that from the test, right? And I see what Paul was trying to do, but it won't work because we could all think of scenarios off the top of our head where we will make that fail with it being a valid OData query, but the round tripping won't work.
I don't know if it's a requirement, but the flexibility to do so is.
I don't have, I'm not vested one way or another. But it begs the question as a result of how the test is being generated, right? So, I mean, you can punt, right? Which is fine, but you have to understand that you are making a declaration about what the expectation is there, right?
Okay, ideally, you should be, people who will be using OData Neo should be able to go and say, I don't like the direction that the OData Neo team took. However, I could, build my own modules, my own services, and plug them into this lakehouse and replace the existing, implementation. So the flexibility to do so. I hope you guys got it by now. This is not about OData Neo. OData Neo happens to be the vehicle of which this idea of rewritable, truly decoupled software can be implemented. That's what I'm trying to accomplish, along with other things. But, if they want to take that route, by all means, like you're thinking, oh, if I'm building this, I'm blocking someone else from being able to accomplish a certain task. That's not it. That's not it. Like if Paul and Hassan today built a system or wrote a test that says, oh, you need to take a string and produce O nodes, someone else can come in and say, I'm going to plug my own service that takes this string and produce O tokens, and these O tokens can be processed differently. Absolutely. Absolutely so. I don't know if you guys remember Project Christine. Does any of you have ever heard of Project Christine? Do you remember when Google did these attempt to build modular phones where you add a camera and a battery?
Yes.
Project Christine is the same thing, but for the desktop computers, which is what Apple ended up doing with their cheese grater. So anyway, let's just go back to Paul's idea. Paul, I'm okay I don't want your test to take away from the other path of how the O node is structured out of a query. I love the idea
It
of iterative.
seems it
Go ahead.
seems that at the problem, the issue is either constructing or deconstructing these models. Okay, and the conversation that's been had was essentially, do we need an interim step to make that process easier? I'm not saying I have preference either way. I'm just saying, hey, this is the suggestion that's come up. If we're going to change it, now's the time to do it before we get too in depth with things.
I think if you build just a simple function in, I think if you build a simple function in your unit test root file that takes an O node with its children and turns it into an OData query, that would be it. And I think you found that out. I think that would be perfect without having to build extension methods or any of that.
Yeah, so ultimately, users are going to want to do that as part of the public API. So what I would suggest we build, instead of building a root O node, we actually build something that's like an OData query object that has those methods on it, which contains the O node, and then can do the serialization.
That's the service, brother. That's the service. Also,
no. It's a thing that you can just declare. So you can just declare a new OData query as an object, and then you can say, hey, give this to me as JSON, or give this to me as a string. Internally, when you declare it, you're declaring it with the original string from the URL, and then it goes ahead and it calls in the tokenization service and it builds out that model. Internally, yes, it would refer to the tokenization service, but externally, as part of our public API, my thinking is we have this thing that you can just declare, which is an OData query. Sort of like declaring a new URI. Yeah, you give it a string and it says, hey, here are all the parts of a URI. These are the segments, these are the paths, these are the path parts, these are the these are the query parameters, this is the host, this is the scheme, this is the verb in a request. But you get what I'm saying, yeah?
Yeah.
So the same thing, but for OData. So we can say, hey, here's a URI, or here's a raw string that represents a URL. Build me an OData model internally from that. And then when I call .to OData string, I expect to get back the OData piece of that.
So you want your constructor of O node to take a query and turns it into an O node?
No, the O node is the internal model object that our
Your
services
OData
process.
query.
The OData query itself, yeah, which contains the O node, the root level node, and then by extension, all of its children recursive, would be the thing that would have these functions on it.
Move it from the constructor to a method and call it a service, and I'm yours. I'm with you.
Sure. I mean, I think services for me, they have a very specific meaning. They do something. They're processing something.
Well, it's converting a query into a model.
Well, yeah. So that internally inside an OData query object, I'd have a reference which would probably be dependency injected to all of my service stack. So I can then build. So integrators would build a to link expression tree or something for an OData query, for example. And all that would do is it would call the relevant services that they would set up through dependency injection. So what I'm really talking about here is like kind of an object that contains all of those services. But you can just initialize with, a string or whatever, and it's set up through dependency injection in some shape or fashion.
So, okay, so basically, just to kind of summarize this is actually great. This is really good. You're basically saying, if I have this object in here, this is your object. What do you want to call it? OData query object? Okay.
Let me show you on my screen.
Show me your screen.
I'll share again.
I have it.
You got it, have you?
Yep.
He controls everything.
I control everything.
Yeah, brilliant. Right. So what I'm saying here is get random query model at the moment returns an O node, right?
Nice.
So
that I agree with. I love it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the public API, when we're done, my thinking would be something like OData query, if I can spell, OData query equals new, and then we'd say OData query, right? And we would just give it some string, yeah, like a URL, some URL, which would then potentially contain, dollar select equals blah, blah, blah. Right.
Yep.
So you would do this, okay, and internally it would go. That object would be like public class, OData query.
And you have a constructor. No, I get it, Paul. I know what you're doing.
So it
I
would
know
have
what
a
you're trying to do.
constructor, but it would also have internally, it would have a property, which would be the O node.
Right.
Yeah. Model.
And that guy is the materialization of your. I get it. The only difference, it's just an implementation detail. The only difference is that instead of calling it an object, just call it a service and have it have a method instead of passing it in the constructor. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, you could build it out as a service, but what I'm thinking is from the point of view of my code, when I'm consuming OData Neo in the future, maybe I've got some, enumerable of, type, some object. I don't know what it will be, some food thing, right?
Yep.
Some set of data, okay? And then what I might want to do with my query, once I've got my query, is I'll say something like some set dot apply my OData query to it.
Right.
And then that would give me back some, iQueryable.
Okay.
Potentially.
You don't need the var.
Yeah. Full query. So this is the link expression tree, yeah? So this is one potential use case for it. Now, the other way is that you just say, dot apply here, and then you pass in the string here, and then behind the scenes, this apply uses dependency injection, goes and gets a whole bunch of services, build out the model, etc., behind the scenes. So we'll just say, apply OData. So this is kind of like how I envisaged a sort of simple use case. You'd have some enumerable set, and you're just saying, hey, apply some OData options to this and just give me back some result. And then I'll take that result and I'll do some processing in my business logic. But equally, the idea behind having the OData query object here meant that I could say something like, OData query dot, I don't know, as JSON or something, and it would just give me back.
Oh, I see where
raw JSON. Yeah?
Yep. Your OData query becomes what I call an exposure component. It's like another layer on top of the services. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So the model and the services internally is all encapsulated inside that OData query.
Yeah,
Object,
absolutely.
yeah. So the OData query object is the public API that the
I am
user
very
consumes.
okay with that. I am very, very okay with that. Except that we're still building the services. We're not there yet.
Yeah. So the reason why I've kind of suggested this at this point is I'm saying, hey, internally there can be some model. How that gets constructed and whether or not there's tokens in the middle and how many services there are somewhat irrelevant. But if this was kind of like the public API that we sort of started with, then we can say, hey, I can think of some simple ways that I might want to consume this. And I think that this is a common thing that API builders forget about, is like, what's the user experience on the other end? So they're more concerned with the functionality and what it can potentially do rather than like how it feels to actually use it when I get to the other end.
Yeah, but Paul, you're talking about exposure layer. I am with you on there. We didn't build that yet. Don't worry about that yet. We just want services that do things, and then how are we going to expose these things? That's the last thing to think about. I even start even from a lower level. I build it from the brokers all the way up, and then later on I decide whether I want to build a nice, API or a client or an SDK or a library.
Yeah, so this is
I'm okay
an
with that. That's
approach
like
thing,
way
right?
down the road. Go ahead.
So it's a case of, are we building from the inside out or from the outside in, essentially?
From the
Thinking
bottom to the
about,
top, like pyramids, Egyptian. Come on, man. Look alive. You know this.
well, yeah, I mean, there's different ways of looking at architecture, right? I mean, I think of it as like onions, where you wrap layer upon layer.
With the freaking onions that people started saying a couple of years ago. Have you guys heard this? Everyone now says onion architecture. You're making me cry. Pun intended.
Yeah. Well, I still hold quite dear to my heart the whole N-tier way of thinking, and I do firmly believe that you should have, that sort of N-tier architecture, because I feel that does result in very clean code. But at the same time, it's kind of like, this is a thing that could appear anywhere in somebody's architecture. So internally, it has to have its own architecture. But how it looks from the outside, I think, really matters, because that's what makes something useful.
Absolutely. If you start from the entry point, that's okay, man. I understand that. Some people build Swagger, documents before they even write the code. Usually teams will do that. I understand. I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
We want to implement a service that takes strings and produces O nodes. And then we can wrap that up in cellophane and put whatever you want on top of it.
Okay, so we're still intent on saying, okay, we're going from string to O node. So we're not having some O token thing in the middle then. Agreed?
I say for now, because we already invested in this direction, and then we can decide later once we produce O nodes and see what these expressions look like. Because if you step back, you'll throw all this away, which I will, at some point in time, but we need to have something solid to build on top of.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say then that maybe where we should be going from here is looking at, if you like, the nodes that we generate are going to be quite important. Yeah, so things like white space we need to capture, braces we need to capture.
So hold on to that thought. This is where you come in, my friend. This is where it hit me yesterday. Sorry, 2 days ago. Building these queries, we were trying to construct these queries from raw strings, yeah. But then while you were kind of going around, this is the beauty of this. You're looking around and trying to solve a problem. And then it hit me. I keep nagging you guys about Euclid's law of axioms. You start from the result and work your way back to the input. Why didn't we start from a random O node like you did? A random O node. Let it generate. Do you know why we didn't do that? Because we wanted to start from a very basic level component, and we started with one string, one item, and I totally forgot, to be honest with you, that ideally you want to start from the result and work your way back into the input, so your business logic will take that input and work its way up to that result. That's how unit tests. I love you, Paul. I want you to know that you're very, very smart. Like, you're wicked smart. This is exactly how I expected this to be. The part that I forgot to tell you is that the filler will do that for you.
Yeah, and this is where we find out why Hassan again is not going to be here next week.
He's not going to be here next week. But I'll tell you this.
Paul's going to Redmond.
I'll tell you this though. You can't use the filler, not just yet, because the filler will produce nested queries. You can just create it by hand, like create an O node by hand, like instantiate a new model called O node and fill in some stuff in it, right? And then just produce that query out of it, and then let your logic do the opposite of that. That's unit tests.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would say to the approach that we're kind of taking at the moment is it is completely random. So
yes, it has to be.
That raises some interesting concerns around, okay, we ultimately still do want to produce something that at its base level must be grounded in reality and sat on top of the standards for a URL at the most base level, right? Even if it's not an OData URL, we need to be able to parse, say,
That's
let's
the
just take the
convention.
query bit of it. Yeah, the query
That's,
string.
yeah, that's
So
that's the convention that you were talking about. I'm okay with that. This is
yeah,
why you're gonna have to construct these O nodes manually first, just a little, until we get to the point where we go and say, okay, we want governed randomization, if there's ever such a thing. Like you're
so
like,
this is where I came a cropper last week, because I was thinking ahead about, and the weird thing is, it was like my own kind of like experience and knowledge was actually working against me at this point, because I was looking at it going, it doesn't look right. It's
you
not
did say
fitting. Why
that.
not? Yeah. And the reason was, at the root level, all your parameters are separated by ampersands, and there's no ampersands in any of our queries. So I'm sitting here looking at it going, this doesn't make any sense. Why? And then it clicked, and I was just like, okay, this. So, I've kind of sort of done exactly like you said. I've worked from the model back, essentially thinking, okay, if the model is our destination here, there's something to be said for coming from that in the first place. However, we have to be aware that the model has to be something useful. We can't just build random data and say, hey, we passed a test. We have to say, but when you put real world data in it, it still makes sense and is logical and is able to be processed correctly. But I think that comes down the line.
But wait, your tokenization service doesn't get, you just said it. It comes down the line. Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
So as long as we keep that goal in mind, we should be fine. But yeah, it's just an approach thing. I think the way that you approach things and the way that I approach things, they are logically the same, but we both completely forgot that, there's different ways of looking at the problem. I've had issues before where I've had a problem where I couldn't understand, say, how to build a complex piece of SQL. And it turned out, no, not even SQL, OData queries, right? So you got two related entity sets, and you can query one and expand into the other, or you can query the other and expand into the one. And like how you do that matters.
Yes.
And sometimes, like, I've solved a really complex problem by just going, why didn't I just start from the other endpoint?
Can you show me what that random query model looked like?
The random query model, the one that was produced by my test?
No, yeah, get random query model. What does that guy look like?
This one here. Okay, so if I stick a breakpoint in here, hopefully, random test am I?
Sam, where did you get that nice haircut?
Myself.
You just picked up the machine and you just went.
Yeah.
You went all Britney Spears. You went full on. All right.
So I'll outline myself too.
Is that how you do it? Okay. So Paul, your 4K monitor is giving us grief. Technology is not working for the betterment. You guys, I heard something really interesting this morning. Some guy was saying the role of technology is to help humans without being visible, without knowing it exists. That's beautiful. That's something Steve Jobs would have said. Like, you're using technology, but you don't know you even know that you don't even know you're using technology. It's helping you without interfering with your daily natural human life. Without turning you into a cyborg, basically.
So,
until the machine uprising.
Sorry.
So this is completely random, and whether or not it does nesting is random as well. So on this occasion, I've run it, and it's just not added any additional nesting. But I'm sure if I run it again, it would add some nesting. So let's try that.
Yeah, do it again. What are you actually using the filler for this one, or?
No, I completely built all this by
You're
hand.
building it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Paul.
Because somebody told me about the filler after I built it. Yeah.
That's
Cheers,
right,
mate. Much appreciated.
Cheers.
That's teamwork. That.
Paul, I remember when I was younger, I joined this company. Ooh, I love that. You're jumping straight into the max model of everything, the nested. So
that's beautiful. That That's a
Yep.
work of art.
Is it right though? Is it parameter, property, property, property? Oh, you son of a gun. You actually are doing it this way. Beautiful. How did you construct it? Can I see?
No, you can't see.
So I can make fun of you. Anyway, this part that you have here is perfect, except that you want to have a, instead of the extension, you just want to have that function living in the test, in the root level. That's it. I'm okay with that. If you do that, man, I'm all for it. And I'm actually really, like, my heart is at peace and happy that we are at this stage. You guys are doing great. I just want to let you know.
So
No, Paul is doing great.
That's Sam for you right there. Well, it's Paul
I'm
actually
arg-
that did the work. We just want to make sure.
I'm arguably the worst programmer here because as
No.
soon as I get put under any pressure, I just
No.
cave.
No. You know, I think if you haven't done this little round, we would have been still in this state where I'm thinking, oh, let's just keep constructing and complicating things. But you already, I'm actually really disappointed in myself. I swear to God, man, like if you saw previous videos, like from 2, 3, 4 years ago that I've recorded, I keep talking about this. Start from your end result and work your way back to the input parameters. Why did I miss this? I don't know.
Weirdly, this week I went back through some of your channel and I went, Hassan, what are you on about? Why are you giving me so much grief? You don't even follow your own advice.
I don't. I evolve. I change. I grow. Someone asked me this the other day. They said, Hassan, what about the previous videos, when you change the engineering standard? I'll be like, it's part of the journey. I want people to look there and be like, wow, he was a fool. It's all out in the open. It's like this Truman Show. Have you guys watched this movie, Truman Show?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the part where the whole world is watching him grow and then he realizes, oh shit, I'm in a bubble. This is not the real world. It's a very interesting movie, man. I find this movie to be one of my favorite. Are we in a bubble, Nick? Do you think so? You're in New York City. You're already a lab experiment.
We're all in we're all in our own self-made bubbles.
That's true.
Okay,
We choose our environments.
I'm conscious that we're sort of running out of time now, so let's
We are.
let's get this committed and do the cleanup work that you wanted me to do. So the 2 JSON and 2 query string, where did you want those?
These need to live in the root file of the test.
In the root file of the test. Okay, so you want them in here with the model generation.
Yeah,
okay.
it takes an O node and turns that into a query. Done.
Okay.
That would be ideally the one test that will delete all the other tests. You already jumped there, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Paul Wardy. I'll tell you this, just for the interest of time. The one last thing, just for you guys to understand. This is how we're evolving. This is how our software is growing, and this is really important to our progress. Um. So okay, let's Paul. You know what needs to be done. I'll give you your time. No pressure there. And let's connect on Friday. We won't have Nick. Sam and Joe. You guys get ready. We're jumping in a very interesting journey. Together. So after Paul is done, we'll just look at his code on Friday. Sam is Michael showing up on Friday or no?
No.
Oh, he just decided, he want to just forego that one. Okay, sounds good. No problem.
I think
Okay.
maybe he need more time.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. And I really appreciate you guys. Let's continue this. We're making great progress. Let's just continue this. I think we're getting closer to something that we can, work with and build on top of. I can't wait for us to jump into that state where we're just shipping an event into a substrate and some other services picking it up and working with it. This is where all the magic happens. But If you have any questions or comments or concerns for people watching us, don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment in the comment section. See you later.
I do think they
Enjoy.
have a
See
lot
you in a
of
week.
concerns.
Yeah, there's a lot of concerns, Sam. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, concerns are good.
Welcome. Any concerns?
They will come. They will all bubble up. Don't worry. All right, guys. I appreciate you.
Don't worry, Sam. I'm having the same heart attacks.
I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.
There.